Lucinda Halpern is a literary agent with over 15 years' experience and the founder of Lucinda Literary, based in New York. Prior to founding her agency, she worked in the publicity division of HarperCollins, where she assisted on the media campaign for Freakonomics, among other New York Times bestsellers. She later worked as a marketing consultant for Gretchen Rubin of The Happiness Project before launching her career as an agent. Her classes and coaching programs have been taught to hundreds of writers worldwide and became the inspiration for Get Signed, Find an Agent, Land a Book Deal, and Become a Published Author, which is how I discovered Lucinda. Welcome to Notes from a Ghost, a podcast about stories and the people who tell them. My name is Charlie, and I'm a ghostwriter. I love a good story. I hope you enjoy this one. Lucinda, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Charlie. I love the idea of your podcast, so hopefully I can be helpful to your audience today.
Yeah, we're trying to bring ghostwriters out of the shadows to
Yeah.
whatever degree we're comfortable. I think the biggest misconception is like even yesterday I had a friend be like, you don't get Reddit. And I'm like, and I like it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, just at a high level, like what does an agent do and why might an author need one?
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about us is we are the trusted gatekeepers to publishing, which means that if you want a traditionally published book, by which I mean a big house like a Simon and Schuster, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, and of course there are a number of really good independent publishers as well. Um, they are generally not looking at unsolicited queries from writers because they would get just way too many of them. So they trust agents to be the stewards, to, be receiving all of that slush from the proverbial slush pile, going through it and recommending to them what's actually really good. And beyond just making those recommendations, developing a proposal or a manuscript to the level that the market would need to see. So that's like a number one what agents are, but what we're also known for, of course, is negotiating your contracts, protecting your rights, getting you the best deal possible, and being your advocate through the course of your publishing career. So there's a lot we do. Um, and it's really fun work and it's very valuable to authors.
And a detail that um, folks who haven't worked with an agent or traditional publisher might not know, you guys work on spec. You make a percentage of what the author makes.
Yeah, that's correct. So agents are now diversifying their models where some of us are doing some coaching and consultation services as well because there is such demand for it. And not everyone who wants to be an author can be an author. I mean, that's just the brutal truth of it. But if you are working in a traditional capacity with an agent, we take 15% of whatever deal we make of what we sell domestically, and we can take 20 to 25% of what we sell internationally or on the film side. So there are all these different rights to be exploited once you've sold that main property of a book, but an agent has to share your vision and work just as hard as you do when you sign up in order to see a book succeed.
And that kind of brings up an interesting point that really because your livelihood depends on finding great writing. And I think that especially because finding getting past these gatekeepers is really hard for creatives and authors. And it can often, there's this feeling of like pick me sometimes, but really you're every bit as hopeful of finding great work as someone is of being found, right?
Definitely. Yep. Which is why I really hate this idea, or I'm saddened and I'm disheartened by this idea that writers are kind of climbing up, you know, peeking above at the agent on the pedestal and saying, please get back to me, please like my work. When it's really not, it shouldn't be hierarchical because agents work for you as writers, and likewise, our livelihoods depend on finding new talent. So never think that you're below us or above us. Like we are on equal footing, wanting to make money on books, for books to have a long life and a wide readership.
What are agents looking for I know that's a huge question,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So, in my book, so when my book gets signed, I talk about the factors that agents and editors and readers are looking for now and always. And it tends to coalesce around a universal theme and a unique point of view. Um, it's like the popular and proven with a new and different spin, because every shelf is now oversaturated, wildly crowded, no matter what you're writing. And you may think no one's written it before, someone's written it. So if someone else is doing that well, you're going to need to make a case for why you are new and different. But that there is a proven context for people who like this kind of book. So that's what ages, I mean, that's the broadest way of understanding what the market looks for, really focusing on that novelty factor in fiction, but also in nonfiction, like surprise, elements of surprise. Tell me something I don't know about a subject I love is something my colleague said and touched me early on. Um, or something I like to say is tell me something counterintuitive, something that flips common perception or busts a myth. What do we believe that we actually should know the truth about? And I think those are the best kinds of self-help books, but they apply to business, memoir, health and lifestyle, all sorts of books. So yeah, there's a lot more we could say in terms of specific categories, but that's what we look for now and always. I guess I'd add to that, at risk of monopolizing the conversation. I guess
no,
that's what I'm here to do.
this is your
Um,
conversation.
I'd add to that never before has platform or audience been so important. So what we mean by platform, the definition at my company, Lucinda Literary, is audience plus reach. So an existing audience and how you're going to reach them. And so it's really telling the story of here are all the people that you are engaging around the content that you are writing about. So there's got to be a really clear link there. It can't be, I'm writing a memoir about my mother, but I'm the most popular yogi on TikTok. It's like, well, who's to say that you're following on TikTok about yoga is going to care about the story of you and your mother? I mean, very few celebrities can get away with that. But worse, and is way more often the case, as you know as well as I do, is the newbie writer who says, I've got a book and my friends and family tell me it's got to be published. And the first question an agent is going to ask is, okay, but who's your audience? How are you
Everyone,
engaging them? Right?
everyone.
And then you say, everyone, and we say a book for everyone's a book for no one, right? So it's, that proof of what you are doing out there to engage people around the concepts in your book is just vitally important. It's half the game.
Mm. And um, we have I have a I want to open up a whole other can of worms about how to get signed because it's in the title of your book. But
Yeah.
there's one thing you that I wanted to make sure to ask you about. You kind of brushed up against there. We're in this moment of where self-publishing and hybrid models have really taken off, and that's something we've talked about on this show on the author side. And there's some where it's a no-brainer, and it's this book has to be self-published because they're
Yeah.
just it lacks those qualities you just described, or the goals of from as the book as a product just don't align with the business model of publishing. And then to me, they're like influencers present a really interesting gray area where it could go either way. You could argue
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
if you have millions of followers and they will buy your book, why not get 70% royalties and just
Sure.
hire some freelancers to format it and publish it yourself? On the other hand, you could walk right into Simon and Schuster or any big five, and that's who they're looking for. What does that look like for an agent? And how has self-publishing affected your business, the way you do business, if at all?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I have more often than not, because of the kinds of categories I represent, which tend to be what I call big idea, that kind of myth busting, this is going to be the conversation changer, the paradigm shift, the big idea that everyone's going to follow in 2024, 2025, or popular science or business and entrepreneurship and self-help, of course, of all kinds. Uh, Self-publishing tends to be where I am convincing authors and influencers not to go, or to at least try me first. Try working with us, try seeing what a publisher can offer you. And mainly what publishers offer, major publishers we're talking about, besides decades of experience doing this, really superb editors, marketers, designers, sales teams, foreign rights teams, like the whole thing within their shop. They're also offering distribution. It's really that simple. They're getting you into bookstores, they're getting you into airports, and so on and so forth. If you self-publish, you've got to do that yourself. And that becomes a much harder hill to climb. If you like, you're going to have to pay for that distribution, much as a publisher pays for that distribution in a Barnes and Noble or elsewhere. You're going to have to print all those books. All of that's going to be at cost to you. So that's where a publisher can really be valuable because once a book is distributed everywhere, now it has this wide reach. It has this kind of integrity with the media, which
Mm,
self-published books have also struggled to obtain. So it can scale your message and open up your business in much bigger ways. Um, if we were in a room and you were an author who wanted to self-publish, that's probably the answer I'd give you. Uh,
mm,
and second to that, we as an agents who represent those categories I do, as well as editors I do business with, are really looking at self-publishing now as fertile territory to mine. Like, hey, this author's doing something really great. They've got masses of reader reviews. They've got a big social media following or some engaged social media following. It's a very cool idea. I like the writing. We're assessing all these factors and we're saying, we'll sign you. We want to do what you're working on next, and we may want to do something with the books you've already self-published. So it's a good decision. It's a tough decision to make, but publishing's a long road, and if you want to go the traditional route later, that opportunity is going to be available to you for the right idea at the right time.
that's phenomenal what you're saying because like I've like I said on this podcast, we've looked at the narrow slice of how for certain types of business books, it's just a foregone conclusion that you're going to be self-publishing. And so it's so interesting to hear the really compelling case for traditional. I mean, the other one too that I would think of, and it goes to what you're saying about media. When I hear this on like a discovery call, it's a red flag, but for some people it is a possibility, and that is getting your book made into a movie.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
I never want to hear that in the first conversation I have with
Yeah,
an
yeah, yeah.
author of
You're
like,
like, I have to see it. Yeah,
my life's going to be a movie. But there are people where that's totally possible. And
sure.
I mean, even something as popular as if you look at like Mark Manson's books or Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, there's no way that that's a Netflix movie and translated into Portuguese and all these other things. If he had self-published, even though he probably would have done quite well sales wise as a successful blogger.
Right, exactly. So yeah, there are all of these opportunities. It's hard work though, but it's hard work either way. I mean, the funny thing about Get Signed, my book is that it is trying to make you think about getting a book deal and finding an agent in the way that you would approach just having the best book possible and reaching the widest audience possible. Because all the rules apply, right? You've got to build the audience in order to get seen. You've got to create a foundation of a great book, which is new and different, which is universal, but has this unique sort of perspective. Hopefully you've got some good writing somewhere in the mix. You've got to package it in a commercial way. It's got to be positioned to stand out in the market. So all of those things, it's got to connect with its readers because it really knows who its reader is. It really knows who it's serving. It really knows the problem it's solving. Do it for a major publisher, do it for yourself. All of these rules are going to make you successful or not if you don't follow them, right? So I mean that's what it's supposed to help you with is just creating a great book with a wide readership. And that's really all you should be focused on as a writer. It shouldn't be like, hey, what does the market want me to write? What are agents looking for right now? It's like, I've got to write this book because it is so urgently needed. And I know it's needed because I'm on Instagram talking to those people every day and they need it. Or I'm on a speaking circuit and people in the audience are asking me this question repeatedly. Or, I'm a novelist and I've been writing a newsletter and people want this content from me. I mean, there's all sorts of ways. Now fiction obviously has slight, differences that we could talk about or not. But that's the way that I encourage every writer to be thinking about what they're doing. It's the intentionality and not the sort of external validation, right?
And I mean, I guess too, that's like another appeal of working with an agent for writers and for authors. I mean, I find myself wanting to work with an agent because I can't stand the businessy stuff and
Yeah,
and all the things that it would be so nice to have some of that taken off my plate.
for
Um,
sure. Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, I was talking to a writer. This is day in, day out doing deals, negotiating, talking about money is so easy for me, and I was talking to one of my fiction authors the other day, and she's like, "Oh, this is so ugly. I'm so sorry to put this on you." She's apologized and apologized. I'm like, "This is my job, and I don't have a single feeling about it. It's just like what's got to be done. You've got to be treated right. You're worth this. This is what we do, and it's just." You're right. Most creatives don't want to be self-promoters. They don't want to chase invoices. They don't want to negotiate the money that they're worth. I mean, there's so much that goes into having a third party represent you, right?
oh, totally. And just, I mean, again, and it's something I've heard from authors I worked with as far as the writing process goes, but same with the publishing process. It's nice not to have to do it alone.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's that piece of it too. The accountability, the partnership, someone thinking through these concepts day in and day out with you, someone improving your work, giving you tough love. I mean, none of that can be understated.
Now, I want to get to your book. I loved it. It was so
Thank you.
helpful. I was in the middle of putting together a query when I read it, and there was stuff that brought me right back to the drawing board and had me. Um, it just was a better query letter because of your book. And I think the thing that a lot of people will want to get out of it is right there in the title, and that is to get signed. Besides the writing good that you mentioned already, um, what how should authors approach, like how does an author get signed? How do you take that next
Yeah,
step?
yeah. So right. So we've talked a bit about the first part of the book, which is coming up with the big idea. And of course, the book has tons of exercises and prompts for how you apply this to your unique work, right? So it's coming up with a big idea, identifying your reader, building your platform. Um, all of those are kind of part one. But part two is how to get that agent, right? How to take the next step. And that always begins with a great pitch. And the funny thing is that the pitch can almost write itself if you have done all of the work of part one, really putting together a great product. Um, then you'll sort of know the things that you're supposed to put in the pitch. But the book gives a whole sort of anatomy of what should be in a query letter. It also has a few rules. I can just recap some of them now. The first is really personalizing your introduction and showing the win-win. So you'll hear a lot from online resources that you should always tailor your letter, right? And agents can detect when you are slushing us with a form letter. I mean, this is nothing short of a job application. You should know the person you're applying to work with, know their list, know where you fit in that. Going a step further, it's really that win-win factor. It's like, hey, I'm writing a memoir. You're looking for memoirs. You did a book just like this. Here's how I can be a great fit for your list. Uh, the second rule that people have always been surprised to learn in Get Signed is the closing with urgency. I'm
Mm.
not a fan of the passive closing. You know, the again, one of the big reveals of this book is it's not about your pitch, it's about creating the foundation for a great book. The second reveal is how to be your own best agent, how to think like agents, how to use the secrets and the hacks that we do. And agents will never write like a passive note to an editor, like, let me know if you're interested. that can work, I guess, if like you're so sort of confident, which most new writers are not in the package that they're bringing. But urgency would look something like you're on a small list of people or you're top of my list. Of course, this has to be genuine. We will
Mm,
also send out if it's false. Uh, People have requested my manuscript. I have other offers I'm seeking, or publishers indicated they're interested in acquiring this, or just yesterday there was something on social media that blew up, or this article. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can encourage a next step. One of the stories I tell in the book, I'm not going to recommend to anyone in your audience, so I'm like, really, should I be telling this story, Lucinda? But one of my authors, said, I'm getting on a plane and
mm.
and I'm arranging interviews. And I'm like, I didn't offer you an interview. In fact, I told you that I'm not particularly interested because your pitch, as wonderful as it is in a very competitive category that I'm struggling, people are struggling to sell at the moment. And she's like, great, you're on my list to interview. I'll be at your office at like 2 tomorrow. And she comes in and she's so charming. She's so charming. And like, you know, better believe it, by the time we're shaking hands, she's like, yeah, I'm meeting with William Morris tomorrow. I've got another agent. And she's not lying about this. She has used the same sort of charm and appeal and conviction in what she is. We're talking about the ultimate crusader. You know that in my book, I talk about the four types
Yeah,
of writers who get book deals. She is the, epitome of a crusader. And she lined up these interviews and she closed me. Like nothing could be better than getting closed by a writer in the sales sense, right? Like you've
sure.
convinced us. I'm convinced we're signing up because it's a matter of whether we're going to take you out or someone else is going to make you a success. So, like, do we want to lose out or do we want to take the gamble?
Oh man, I need to because I remember I highlighted those parts, but I think I need to take it a step further and put them on post-it notes like on my wall because I am on the so sorry to bother you end of the spectrum and this very
That's all good.
other
That's all
side of the
good.
Atlantic politeness.
Do you remember? I can recap for your listeners, but do you remember what the four types
Yeah,
are?
what were I do not remember the four types. I remember the Crusader for sure.
Yeah. The
Um,
ideator is the person
yeah,
who's like prolific, always having ideas. The data collector is the person who's doing all the market research, understanding exactly where their book fits in the market. The Crusader we talked about is like the tenacious, stops at nothing, no stone unturned. And the everywhereist is the person who has a visibly big platform or audience who really, doesn't shy away from connecting with readers.
and could that include just uncanny networking? Like the person maybe isn't like famous, but they kind of have a sort of
Yeah,
a
yeah, so absolutely. So in the marketing chapter of Get Signed, which is called Get Seen, we talk about the fact that social media is, one really strong indication, certainly where agents are looking to see about your engagement. But another thing that they're looking for is your network, is the people that are going to endorse you or write a forward or that you just generally know because it kind of does work in certain imprints like a club. If they're publishing five of your friends, and then those five people are going to say, I know Dan, you got to publish Dan. It's like there's a very good chance they're going to publish Dan. And so that friend of a friend access, people who are vouching for you with bigger platforms than your own, sometimes can be, I wouldn't say it's all that you need, to be honest, Charlie. I think you need a little more than that without having mega social media numbers, but it's certainly a very strong piece of your platform. And I would say even more so for fiction authors.
I was gonna
Uh,
like what you're describing, a very bad version of it sounds like the fiction I don't like, where it's like this person's getting published because they're getting published. Like, the
mm,
books that I grew up
mm-hmm,
just
mm-hmm.
thinking like, why? Like,
It's a good
no,
point.
nobody, like, but where, and I'm talking major, major authors, but it's nobody's favorite author. They're kind of almost the equivalent of those like 90s wannabe bands. Um,
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. They're sort of it's like they're Nepo babies. Like they're
yeah,
getting because they had the connections. But I got to say that happens more and more rarely now because the writing trade has shrunk because the pool has actually largened with social media, right? Like you could be an expert, you don't have to be a writer by trade, and you can still publish a heck of a successful book. That proof is in the pudding. So yeah, so it's an interesting thing where like the as I'm saying it, the barrier to entry is quite high, but it's also like really broad.
Yes.
Isn't that odd? A lot of people can get in there, but they've got to be at a high level in what I call the three keys: platform, writing, big idea, and you only need two of the three. Um, so, that can be very encouraging because not everyone is a fantastic writer. That's why they're hiring you, Charlie, right? But if they've got like something of a good idea there, if they've got a platform that needs just a little further development, um, that can look really good to an agent as it
Hmm.
matures.
And you mentioned one thing too when you talk about like then that's proposals. And when I bring up proposals with ghostwriting clients, and I've only done a couple of them at this point. Again, fewer people right out the gate are going traditional.
Yeah.
So few people outside of our industry know that that's how nonfiction books are sold and know that proposals are a thing. And I bring it up almost like this, hey, there's this other thing we could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the reason that fiction isn't sold on the basis of proposals because we'd be waiting a long time if everybody who said they have a book idea, fiction book idea,
It's a good question.
is that too cynical?
I've never asked an editor why that is, but I would imagine it's because fiction and often memoir is all about the writing. It's all about
Okay.
what's on the page. So
Yeah.
they need to see the whole thing baked, the whole plot, the whole arc, who are all the characters they meet. Um, and nonfiction just isn't that way because it's so like often high concept, or if you're a journalist or narrative nonfiction, it's about news breaks. Like there could be a lot to get people excited at the idea level,
Yes.
and also showcase some of the writing, which a book proposal does perfectly fine. And then an editor can get involved and help you flesh that out.
Well, that's something we've been putting together some of these like bonus episodes, and I think that proposals probably deserve their own episode.
For
And
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we do a lot of coaching and of courses on proposals. It's a really, I love to teach them. It is an art and a science. We pretty much have a template for those we do at Lucinda Literary that, again, it's like the universal unique. We allow writers to take this template and that allows them to be more creative, to add their unique flair, but they see all the ingredients that have to work.
yes, I like that universal unique. So it's kind of the last like uh talking shop question. I want to be mindful of your time here, but how should ghostwriters think about navigating relationships with agents? And I'm talking specifically like let's say a ghostwriter who doesn't have an agent is working on a book that is agented on behalf of an author. What is that relationship? Is that essentially for the purposes of that book? Is it the author's agent?
That would represent you on the deal with the author, or
Yeah.
talking to another, bringing in another agent to represent you.
I mean, could that happen? For example, like,
Yep. Just did with one of my clients. I mean, yeah, so I think we were speaking about this before. We represent a number of ghostwriters who we have deep relationships with, who have like developed from the ground up proposals that we've sold for six, seven figures to major publishers. And so we have a lot of faith in those writers to do a good job. We also know that our clients like working with them. But it happens all the time that they will be contacted by an author through their own, independent networking, and the author will have an agent and they will want to come in with their own representation because they want their interests to be protected, because they might have some troubleshooting, they might need some invoice chasing, they might need their fee to be elevated to a different level. So yeah, I mean, it's a good question to ask. Agents are involved a lot of the time for collaborators, for ghostwriters.
okay.
So
I
yeah,
yeah,
and if
I
you work
hadn't
with
even
an
thought of that.
agent, yeah, absolutely. And if you work with an agent on a project and they really, like, say you're working unrepresented and then you're working with the author, and the author has an agent. You just all became this like dream team, this great trio. And now the agent thinks you're just fantastic. They love working with you. They love your work. The writing was successful. There is nothing to stop you from after that collaboration approaching that agent for a conversation and saying, would love to would love to think about working with you on this basis, whether it's your own personal work as an author or whether it's collaboration work you do. And this has really happened to me several times over with writers, and it's actually totally wonderful because I love giving people business who are
Mm,
good people, who are hard workers.
yes.
So
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that coming from other creative fields, like specifically I'm thinking of like freelance designers, freelance copywriters, they would probably be used to these like soft non-compete clauses where you kind of aren't allowed to seek out a professional relationship with someone who you've worked with through an agency or something. But it sounds like this is a much friendlier.
I think so. I mean, you raise a good point, though. I think as a courtesy to the author that you're working with, it's great to say, "Hey, I'm hoping I could grab some of your agent's time. You think that person be open to it and get buy-in from that person, and not sort of do it without them knowing. I think that you should absolutely go to the author first.
If you like, let's say you are represented by an agent as a ghostwriter, and someone comes along and it's to do like a purely self-published like lead generation ebook or something. Now, does an agent have 15% of like everything you do as a writer? Or if they're not going to be representing that book or working on it in any way, is that your own private thing?
Yeah, good question. So if the agent is just representing you on a collaboration deal, but not necessarily representing the book, then they're still charging their 15% for that collaboration deal because that collaboration deal can often be more than a publishing deal, can often, right? So it's not insignificant, and it goes into that bucket of how agents make their livelihoods, right? There's an agent I know in New York who represents ghostwriters exclusively. That's all she does. And it's very cool. And she's, been doing it for years. So yes, they get a piece of that deal, but again, they're acting in all the ways they would as an author, as if you were an author that they represented, same deal. And in terms of a lead magnet or self-published book, yeah, it sort of makes no difference from that deal standpoint as to what the product is that you are engaging in a collaboration to do.
And that's interesting to think too, like further down the road of how, like what that could end up being.
Yeah. I mean, the way to think about it for you, Charlie, or for people in your position is there's going to be a lot that you'll just want to do independently, independent editing and developmental and coaching and maybe some lead magnets or self-published books that will be completely, you know, easy and fine for you to do yourself, where there's potential of an actual deal happening, right? Or higher value, longer word count, bigger project that's going to take your time. It's probably going to be beneficial to talk with an agent about representing you on that, right? Um, Again, as we were talking before, I think that most ghostwriters sell themselves really short in terms of the money that's out there for for writing a book because people really really want that service if they're not trained writers and they want a good book that they can be proud of. So you're providing a real service, and that should never be yeah, underestimated or undervalued.
This episode, as every episode, is brought to you by charging more, because that seems to be the take home message uh,
Yeah.
that comes up again and again. Yeah. Um,
And knowing you're worth it, right? It's
yes.
like there's got to be substance behind that. And usually the way that people are considering their fees, again, as we were talking about before, is the more success they have, the more they will be able to elevate their fees. So there is a counter argument for get in with someone on spec or at a low premium because you know that book is going to be successful or the author's going to have lots of people to refer to you or there's going to be an agent connection to be made. There's so many reasons to get involved in a book. Let's not forget about the fact that you might just love writing it. You shouldn't take on anything you're not going to love doing, that you don't
Hmm.
feel like you can deliver on 100%. So if all of those things check out, like it's sort of the same analog as before. Don't be focused on the money, be focused on what's the best product that I can deliver.
Lucinda, what's on the horizon that you're excited about, and what are you looking for manuscript wise?
Yeah. Um, So what am I excited about? I mean, we have been doing from out of this book, like it's absolutely true. It was a thing I just used to say when I was an agent without having been an author. Obviously, now being an author has like upped my empathy game and my agenting game tenfold because I understand the experience. I understand firsthand what they're going through. So it's very different now. But what's also come out of it is it's a business game changer. So for us, yeah, we have more sort of submissions and awareness than there's ever been around the agency, but we also, as you know, offer a lot of cool coaching experiences and courses and, just like a whole portfolio of things, live events where we invite experts in and authors and other people. Uh, and that's the most fun for me is doing coaching that is different but complementary to what ghostwriters do, which is here's what an agent and the market is looking for. Here's how you're going to package this in a big picture way. And then you're going to work with someone like Charlie to sort of execute on this and like handle all the fine tuning. But here's where you should be pivoting your idea entirely or how you should be presenting yourself differently. So those are the types of offerings that have been really exploding for us as a result of the book and that I'm super excited to keep launching through the year and allow me to meet with so many writers that I'd never be able to in my slush pile, right? Like now I'm actually meeting with writers, they're pitching me their books, and I'm saying to them, you're pitching this wrong. Here's what you should do. And then when they come back to me, they're either, getting signed or they're getting response or they're getting good feedback or they're going to another agent. Like they're just so much more prepared in
Mm.
this process. So that's what I'm excited about from the business side of things. And then in terms of what I'm looking for manuscript wise, I'm actually now taking um, a beat to really look at more literary products because I that's sort of where I come from, where my heart is. I was always a literary fiction lover. I've watched how narrative nonfiction has really had a life in movies and in podcasts and blending those two. I love a good business narrative. I love a coming of age story that involves sort of a business landscape. Uh, so those are things, I'm always going to love a great big idea book by a PhD or a psychologist or an MD. I'm going to love an entrepreneurship book by someone who's got a big audience. I'm going to love a self-dev book. I've been selling a ton of those, but I'm looking for really good writing.
Mm.
I'm really looking for right now. I'm excited to dig my teeth into something longer form with someone who's had some writing training. So, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always looking to read good writing, so it's good to know that there's
Yes.
someone out there bringing more of that into the world.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll just tell you, I know we're wrapping up. I'll just tell
Yeah.
your listeners where to go. So,
Yes, please.
um,
That's what I was going to ask.
for the Get Signed book, obviously you can go to Amazon and buy it, but if you go to getsignedbook.com/bonuses, you actually get the book plus 16 recorded interviews I've had with best-selling authors like Mike Michalowicz and Adam Grant and all sorts of people, along with editors and agents, some of the best, hearing directly from their mouths what they look for in first-time authors. So it's a ton of material. You get an author's workbook. You get all of this cool stuff if you go to the bonuses site for ordering the book. And then, of course, you'll find on that site or on lucindaliterary.com all of our coaching classes, all of the stuff I was mentioning. You'll also find a way to submit to us at lucindaliterary.com. And yeah, I think that gives you all the links. And I think your listeners are getting a free sort of downloadable from us today, a free gift. So just appreciate everyone who's listened to this.
Well, Lucinda, thanks again, and thanks for the book. I mean, it really was. I think I read it in one sitting, and it was
Oh,
just
wow. Well,
it
you're a
was
reader.
like a seminar on yeah, how to get signed, but also kind
Thank
of, and
you.
I think a lot of what's come through in this conversation is really clear on the page, and that is this attitude of being a storytelling professional and looking at the business side of it and the pitching side of it in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. It all goes hand in hand. Your pitch is your book, like they're interwoven. And I just don't want people to think of sales and marketing in this like, ick, I can't do it, I'm creative way. I want them to get excited about it. I want to motivate them and make them feel confident that they can do this. Um, and again, as they'll find in the book, it's about identifying your strength. It's about identifying the one of the four writer types that you are and
Yes.
leveraging it. So anyway, thanks so much.
Thanks again for your time. That was awesome.
Absolutely. Okay.
If you have an epic story, I'd love to hear it. You can find me at dailypros.com or on LinkedIn. My links and Lucinda's are in the show notes. Thanks for listening.